You think keto is new? 10,000 years ago, one wrong meal meant death. So, survivors turned raw milk into a weapon. This is the brutal origin of keto. And you have never heard the real story.
Every few months, a headline calls keto a dangerous fad, a new diet with no history. But that is a lie. Buried in the ground from the Zagros Mountains to the Danube River is the proof. Humans have eaten this way since we first kept animals.
Today, I will take you inside the survival chemistry of ancient milk. I will show you how a deadly raw liquid became the world's first low-carb superfood.
And I will share the evidence that our ancestors lived in ketosis thousands of years before.
The first diet book was written.
By the end, you will never look at a piece of aged cheese the same way again. Welcome back to Curve. We uncover the dark, untold histories of the food that shaped us. If you are new here and want to real primal roots of your nutrition, hit subscribe. Let us travel back to 8000 BCE. What happened there changes everything. The story we are all told is simple. Every humans were grain farmers. Bread built civilization. But that story is not complete. Around 10,000 years ago, Neolithic communities faced a brutal truth. Wild game was seasonal. Grains could fail and raw milk from a cow, goat or sheep was toxic. It held a sugar called lactose. Most early adults could not digest it. One wrong drink led to severe sickness, even death. But these people were not victims. They watched, they learned, and they found the world's first biological hack, fermentation. By letting milk sit in a clay pot under the warm Near East sun, tiny bacteria began eating the lactose sugar. What remained was a thick, tangy, low-carb food, the ancestor of yogurt, kefir, and hard cheese. Rich in protein, rich in fat, and it lasted for months without spoiling. Here is where the paradox hits.
History books say grains were the primary fuel of civilization. But the dirt tells a different story. Fermented dairy was the survival fuel. High-carb grains were the backup plan.
The main engine of human expansion was an accidental ketogenic diet.
Once you see the chemistry, you cannot unsee it.
8000 BCE. The foothills of the Zagros Mountains. A woman pours fresh sheep's milk into a clay vessel. Within hours, unseen microbes began a chemical war. Lactose, the sugar, is under attack. Days later, the liquid was become a thick, sour, low-sugar gel. She has just made humanity's first keto staple, and she does not even know it. Now, let me take you deeper into the actual chemistry, because without this, you miss why this is not just a history lesson. It is the foundation of diet you follow today. Raw mammal's milk is a sugar bomb. Lactose makes up about 4 to 5% of its weight for an adult gut that cannot handle it. That sugar is a poison. It draws water in, it ferments wildly, and it creates a gut disaster. But when you let milk sour naturally in a warm clay pot, something remarkable happens. Lactic acid bacteria began in a feeding frenzy. They eat the lactose and release lactic acid. The pH drops fast, the milk curdles, and the sugar content plummets, often below 1%. What remains is a matrix of protein, milk fat, and vitamin A, D, and K2, plus a living army of good bacteria. It is low carb. It makes you full. It preserves itself. And this was not a luxury. It was a survival lever. Tribes carrying fermented milk in skin bags could travel for days, sustained by a food that needed no fire, no fridge, and no grain. In a world where every calorie counted, this single discovery multiplied their chance to live.
And here is the connection that hits hard. When you eat a piece of aged parmesan or sip unsweetened kefir today, you are tasting the same biochemical product that kept your ancestors alive through famine and ices.
The only difference? Now we have lab data proving they were in ketosis, burning fat, not carbs, as their default state. Lactobacillus, Streptococcus thermophilus. These tiny creatures are older than farming. In a single night, they can remove up to 80% of the lactose in a pot of milk. The curd is that left, a proto cheese, has fat level of 20% and protein that rivals a steak. For a shepherd in 6000 BCE, this was not a snack. It was fuel that decided if the tribe reached the next water source alive.
If the story is already rewritten, what you thought about keto, hit that like button, because what comes next is where the proof becomes undeniable. You want to see this.
Let me give you a piece of context that modern health advice often misses. We live in a world of fridges and expiration dates. But imagine a world with no fridge, no freezer, just milk from a goat that would turn deadly within hours. Fermentation was not a foodie choice. It was the only way to make animal food stable. And here is the brutal biohack I find astonishing. When you ferment milk into a low-carb cheese, you are not just saving calories. You are making a food that fights off rot. The high acidity, a pH around 4, kills bad pathogens like salmonella. Meanwhile, fresh fruits and grains full of simple sugars ferment into alcohol or rot within days unless carefully dried. This means ancient keto foods had a built-in survival age. A wheel of hard cheese could age for years in a cave, becoming more rich, more digestible, more precious over time. A skin bag of kefir would travel across the Anatolian plateau with zero energy. And there is another layer we are just starting to understand: the gut connection. Scientists have scrapped ancient tooth plug from Neolithic remains in Poland, in Turkey. They found preserved DNA of Lactobacillus and Bifidobacterium, the exact same families we now link to gut health and lower inflammation. Our ancestors were seeding their gut with keto-friendly probiotics thousands of years before the first pill hits a store shelf.
This means the modern keto life is not a weird anomaly, a return to a gut ecosystem that was built by survivors. Comment below right now.
Did you know that Neolithic cheese had almost zero carbs and worked as a survival keto staple? Even nutrition textbook miss this.
Shocked. Tell me. I read every single comments.
A Neolithic cheese wheels from 5500 BCE found in Poland held intact milk fat and bacterial DNA. It was buried in a clay pot aged on purpose. That cheese had less than 1 gram of carb per 100 grams. It was a survival food. It was a probiotic and it was ketogenic long before the word existed. So let me dismantle the myth once and for all.
Keto is not a Silicon Valley biohack. It is not a 20th century medical fad. And it is not reckless.
The archaeological record is shooting at us at sites like Catalhoyuk in Turkey. Bone analysis shows a diet heavy in animal fats and fermented dairy with shockingly low grain use. Pottery from the Danube George dating to 6000 BCE shows fermented, low-carb dairy was a staple, not a rare treat. When you compare those ancient foods to modern health bars, it is almost funny. An ounce of aged sheep cheese from the Zagros tradition delivers complete protein, vitamin K2, and a probiotic profile that your 2026 protein bar can only dream of. The most humbling part, these ancient people were fat adapted. They did not call it ketosis. They did not measure blood levels, but their bodies ran on fat because survival demanded it. They were lean, flexible, and free of chronic sickness we face today, not by choice, but because their world forced the healthiest metabolic state onto them. Now, here is the twist. We spent decades building a food system that does not the exact opposite. Hyper-sweet, self-stable carbs that spike your insulin and leave you hungry. And then we call the ancient low-carb diet that sustained us for millennia extreme.
The real extreme diet is not keto. It is the modern flood of industrial carbohydrates that has no parallel in all human history. Our ancestors were fat adapted by need.
And the foods they made, fermented cheeses, kefirs, cultured butters, are the same foods that can restore metabolic health today. This is not a guess, it is ancient fact meeting modern science. The fat residue in pots do not die. When scientists scrapes a 7,000 years old pot from the Danube, they find the chemical fingerprints of hard cheese. A food with almost zero carbs. These people were not loading up on grains. They were eating fat, protein, and live bacteria, and they thrived.
Let me bring this together. A 10,000 years old need to survive. Fermentation accidentally made the world's first keto staples.
The chemistry of lactose removal still working in your yogurt today. Is this the same life-saving trick that guided nomads across continents?
And the proof, from polished clay pots to Turkish bones, shows our ancestors were fat adapted and healthy long before the word keto was ever spoken. The food you eat on a carb diet, aged cheese, kefirs, butters, are not new inventions. They are old tools, perfected by people with no labs, no influencers, no diet book.
They had clay pots, raw milks, and a fierce will to live. I made videos right here that exposes the dark, forgotten history of another foods that changed the world. If Curry has added something real to you today, hit subscribe. I will see you in the next one.